So now that we've gone over what wavetables are, let's talk about and categorize 3 different types of wavetables. Now this is a little bit of a generalization for sure, but you'll pretty much find that these are the main categories of wavetables that you will come across in most wavetable synths. Now, in Serum, by default, you'll get analog wavetables, digital, which is down here, and spectral. Okay, you'll also get some other things on here like vowels. So there's kind of like a fourth one, which I'll kind of put in as like an honorable mention. But all these other wavetables, these are ones that I've either made or I've downloaded from other sources. So let's talk about analog wavetables. When would you use an analog wavetable? What they are? How are they different from digital, spectral, and vowels? Well, analog wavetables, it's interesting because it's a little bit of a misnomer, because a true analog synth uses a waveform, not a wavetable. So digital synths like the PPG Wave were one of the first and one of the most iconic wavetable synths. They were digital. So it's kind of like this misnomer. But for the most part, the analog wavetables in Serum will get you in the ballpark of the source sound or source waveforms of Moog synths, like maybe a Roland Juno, which we can see right here as J and O. Now, the interesting things about a lot of these analog wavetables are they're not necessarily wavetables so much as they are different waveforms that you can select, right? So this one right here all has hard stops. If we go to the wavetable editor, we can see that it's a combination of 10 different waveforms, and they are all from the Roland, the Juno synth, right? Now, if I move between these with an LFO modulating through the different wavetables or different wavetable frames, there's going to be a real hard stop in between each of them. Let's check it out. So we turn the rate down. Right, it's not the most musical thing in the world. Okay, but what is cool is that these analog waveforms give you a really interesting way to basically get the source sound of really any synth. You could sample any hardware synth and then use that waveform to just have a constant, continuously looping waveform, which is really nice. So let's remove the modulator on that. Let's go through a couple other the analog ones. Basic shapes. This is the one we looked at in the first video, or the second video of this tutorial, where we're looking at the basic shapes of synthesis. Again, this will have a hard stop in between all of them. Now here's a cool little thing you can do. So this specific wavetable has 7 distinct waveforms making up its wavetable. If we go to the wavetable editor by clicking on this pencil, go to Morph, select Crossfade, and I'll do Spectral at the same time. Now it looks a little bit different, right? Those main waveforms are still there, but there's also this like grayed out area in the oscillator. So now if I move through this with an LFO, it's going to be a much more musical result. Right? So that's one way that you can make the analog wavetables that have hard stops in between the different frames into an actual wavetable. So here's basically just a square wave that slightly changes as it goes. Now, in terms of sounds, if you're trying to layer a sound where you're trying to make a sound that is a little bit analog sounding, a little bit digital, using one of these analog waveforms is a really cool tool, because even if you move through the wavetable position to get some nice, a little bit of movement, a little bit of uniqueness happening, I guess, with the source sound, it's usually not going to overtake the sound, right? Like if this was, let's turn on our filter. If this was a pad sound, let me turn up the filter a little bit, add some voices. Let's add this LFO to the filter. So let's say this was a actual pad sound, right? Let me get on some reverb real quick. See, now the movement through the wavetable position isn't overtaking, let me set this to trigger, isn't going to overtake the entire sound. It's not going to make it so noticeable that you're only hearing the wavetable position movement. So your ear would think that you're basically just moving through the filter, but it's actually doing both. That's what's unique about Serum and wavetable synths in general. Okay. So that's what the wavetable, the analog wavetables are good for. If you're trying to make like an analog style bass, let me go to one of these real quick. If you're trying to make like any type of like analog plucky bass, right? Any of the analog waveforms are going to be good, right? So this is a combination of a Juno waveform and a mini bass. So this one is a blend between a analog wavetable and a more digital one. I personally think that is one of the most unique features to Serum, is basically unlimited resources to pull in different analog themed or inspired wavetables and blend those with really unique wavetables. If we solo oscillator A in this example, it's a pretty cool sound on its own. If we solo oscillator B, really weird and unique sound. You put those together and blend them how you want, and it can be more digital or more analog as you go. All right, so speaking of digital, I've initialized the preset, and let's start to check out some of these digital waveforms or wavetables. And this is the second main category of wavetables that you'll come across in Serum and most wavetable synths. So let's look at some of these. Let's go through them. They're going to look different than a lot of the analog wavetables. Okay, there'll be some really weird ones like this one. Now this one's just crazy. Now the theme that you'll notice with most of the digital wavetables in comparison to the analog wavetables is that the difference between your first frame and your last frame and the cycles in between them, it's usually more pronounced. It's a bigger change in tone. Right? So that one changes quite a lot in the middle one. Now this one seems more like one you'd find in the analog section, but it still is a pretty big change throughout the middle. But that one's not as crazy as some of them can get. Like this one, for instance, starts off with no sound. So here's a really good one. So it starts off with a really kind of a complex wave, right? And then as you go through, it gets even more complex at points. And by complex, I mean these little noise sections of this shape here will add high-end harmonics to your sound. So listen to this. So that's a similar shape, but it's not nearly as buzzy, right? And I just changed the wavetable. So the digital ones have some crazy changes, and that will be very evident if we pop an LFO onto the wavetable position. We'll set trigger, we'll set it to a bar, and we play some. Right, so that would be the main difference between the analog and the digital. Now, when it comes time to actually make sounds, what you use is, I would say, almost always a stylistic choice, because you can get a digital sounding saw wavetable as well as an analog sounding wavetable out of Serum. It just really depends what you're going for with your aesthetic. But if you're trying to make like growl basses, or you're trying to make really digital sounds, mess around for sure with some of the digital ones. There's some really cool, I really like this Voxu one. I've used this on a few presets. It's like a vocal sound. So there's there's some really interesting, more experimental sounds inside of the digital folder. Now let's go to what I said was the third main section, and that's spectral wavetables. Now spectral wavetables are going to be even crazier looking than the digital ones for the most part. They're not going to be as spaced out. If you know anything about spectral synthesis, it's a great way to do like analog modeling, like for voice and some really interesting stuff. So if we look at these, like Squelchy, you'll probably remember Squelchy from Massive. Now, the spectral ones are great for growls, voice format type things. Run one of those into a format filter, and you're going to be having some really crazy. Like this one is beautiful. I just want to stare at that for hours. They're usually quite bright and gritty. But those are the spectral wavetables. Now let's jump down to, I said it was kind of like the honorable mention, and that's vowel wavetables. Now this is great for, obviously, vocals. Right, so those are your four main categories. I would say three, and then an honorable mention, fourth for the vowels. And layering between those can get some really interesting effects. And there is as we move through the different warp modes and as we get a little bit deeper in this tutorial course, you'll see when I prefer to use certain types of wavetables over their counterparts. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next video.